to what extent has the secular community been complicit? To what extent have they, by not advocating for changes, have non-ultra-Orthodox people and groups capitulated to ultra-Orthodox? And how is that contributing to them? What is that all about?
Right. So, for instance, the example of Nir Barkat and the Jerusalem Marathon.
Yeah.
So, that's a perfect example. Nir Barkat is not ultra-Orthodox, but somehow he had this idea that the right thing for him to do was to not allow women's pictures on his website or in the brochures or on the buses, for example. And the Canaan Bus Company is another example of, they're not a religious, not the bus company, the advertising company on buses. They're not a religious company, but they think, oh, this is what our advertisers want. So, or, for example, Ruby Rivlin, who's now the president of Israel, when he was Speaker of the House, he made a decision not to allow women to sing in the Knesset choir. Women were supposed to sing. And so he did it because he said, we don't want to offend the sensibilities of the religious parties. Like, it's okay to offend the sensibilities of 50% of the population because they're just women, but we can't offend the religious parties. So it's that kind of thinking which says, we don't want to offend those religious parties that really is the most damaging to women. And it's really interesting for a few reasons. First of all, because it's not really what all Haredi people want at all. It's really just the extremists who want that. And it was proven with the story of this radio station, and this is a really important story, I think, actually. The Kol Barama radio station, this ultra-Orthodox radio station that's funded by the government, does not allow women on air, not just singing, okay? It doesn't allow women DJs, it doesn't allow women newsreaders, it doesn't allow women in advertising, it doesn't even allow women to call up and ask a question to the news presenter or to whoever program. If a woman wants to ask a question, she has to fax it in and it will be read by a man. So a bunch of women's groups got together and petitioned against this and said, this is illegal. So in this Knesset hearing, the business head of the Kol Barama radio station came and said, and he himself also isn't religious, but he's the business manager. And he said, what can you do? This is what our clients want. So originally the government still said, well, you still can't do it. You got to give women a few hours. At least give women, 4 hours a week or 6 hours a week. And at first they agreed, and they didn't do it. They didn't live up to their agreement. So the women's groups pushed more, and finally they said, you know what, you're claiming that this is what your clients want, but we don't think that's true. Which, by the way, when they say clients, they mean men, right? So like even men only count as listeners, So what they did is the women's groups led by Iraq and Kolech is the Orthodox Feminist Organization in Israel. So they got together and they did a market research, and they called up people who are regular listeners to the radio station. And they did the work really well. Like, they didn't just say, oh, did you hear of Kol Barama? They would say things like, oh, what program was on Tuesday at 10 o'clock? And like that, to make sure that these were the real listeners. And what they discovered, and they said, do you want to hear women or don't you? And what they found was that 60 to 70% of the people wanted to hear women.
Of course.
So that, I think, is a really, really important point.
Did it change?
Of research. So what happened was that the women's groups brought a lawsuit. They sued for 100 million shekels, which is about $25 million. And about 2 months ago, they won. Wow. They won the lawsuit, which is a huge precedent. But it was based on this idea that this isn't what people want. It's not even what the Haredi community wants. So what you have is a situation in which some business leaders and political leaders who are secular politicians and secular business leaders have this perception that in order to appease the Haredi community, they have to exclude women. But it's not really what the Haredi community wants, even,